In today's episode, we're going to talk about changes in the holistic admissions landscape and where things may be going next. Let's talk about holistic success. Hi everyone, I'm Kelly Dore, co-founder and VP of Science and Innovation at Acuity Insights. Welcome to this episode of the Holistic Success Show. Here with me today is Dr. Kristen Goodell, who is Associate Dean of Admissions at the Boston University Chobanian and Avedisian School of Medicine and is a family doctor. She not only is an expert in holistic admissions, but she's also a big believer in them as somebody who was once an atypical applicant who went on to do incredibly well in medical school and have a tremendous career. I've been fortunate enough to see Kristen at work with her admissions committee and have seen her passion for the power and the impact of the holistic process. I'm so excited to talk to Kristen about her thoughts on holistic admissions, including where she sees it going in the future. Welcome, Kristen.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is so great to have you on the show, and thank you for taking the time. So let's get started. So, Kristen, you're known as somebody who's a passionate proponent of holistic admissions. What does a holistic admissions approach look like to you?
That's a great question, and I'm glad that you asked it because a thing that has become clear to me is that different medical schools mean different things by holistic admissions. And, if you look at the definition that was promulgated a long time ago by my predecessor, Bob Witzberg, holistic admissions means giving balanced consideration to different aspects of the application. But what I've discovered is many schools have different ways of doing that. And, everything from, they set some cutoffs or limits for all different sorts of parts of the application requirements. And then once you get kind of above that threshold, they stop looking at that thing and just move on to a different metric. Versus what we do, which I really think of as kind of the spirit of holistic admissions, which is throughout the whole process, taking into account all the different parts of the application and really thinking about, what do all these different aspects of the application tell us about the applicant? So what I say to applicants and what I really mean is what we are trying to do is to understand who you are and what are the special and wonderful things that you bring to the table of medicine.
That's super. And I know some schools consider holistic admissions a little bit differently. And maybe we talk about the two forms for just a second. So it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you really take, all the parts of the applicant that you get within the admissions process and carry that with them through the journey of their application. Mm-hmm. Whereas some schools may take, MCAT score or a GPA mm-hmm. and use it and then discount it from being used and going forward using other tools, be it interview score or other aspects of them. When you think about holistic admissions, what are the values or the benefits of the two different types of processes?
Right. I think I can speak most effectively to what I think the value is for us of considering everything throughout the process. So when we're doing admissions, we are trying to make the right decision for each individual applicant. And also we are trying to get a class that we can support in meeting their goals as they go through all of medical school. And so when we don't want all of our applicants to look the same. And I think a risk if you kind of set criteria and then sort of follow through an algorithm, if you hit this standard, then you go to this part of the algorithm and then we're looking for this. I worry that you'd end up with a group of people that looks kind of uniform. And I'm not talking about socio-demographic uniformity. I'm talking about like in terms of achievements. But what we want actually is a group of people who have a number of things in common that they share, like, academic ability, like passion for the study of medicine, like a really strong, powerful inclination to help the people that need the most help. So we want people to share those, but we also really want people to have a whole bunch of things about them that are different. We want our small discussion groups to have people with all different perspectives. And so looking at the whole application throughout allows us to kind of balance different people, if that makes sense. And I should say, we do this in our school setting as well. So we have switched from a lecture-based curriculum to a flipped classroom-based curriculum, which means that even in the basic sciences, students are learning in small groups of 8. And I help the medical education office to assign people to groups based on some of their experiences. So, for example, we don't want some groups to have 6 out of 8 people who all did 2 years of research at the NIH, because that's too many people looking at through the same lens. But we would love it if all of those people with lots of research experience are mixed up with people who are like, oh, well, I just did a little research in undergrad, but I was a paramedic for 2 years. You know what I mean? Because different people are then bringing different aspects, of what they know and what they're great at to the table. So, and it goes with academic strength too. If we're looking at academic metrics, we think it's perfectly fine to have people with a range of different histories of academic performance. We believe that every single person we admit is absolutely capable of being successful in our curriculum. Otherwise, we don't interview them. But it's fine to have some of those folks who we think are like rising stars we're catching on the way up, and other folks who've been like sailing right along without a problem. So, so that's why we do that kind of looking at everything throughout. It's because we want the whole class to be balanced. We don't want to end up with a whole bunch of people who are, I don't know, the same in terms of their experiences and backgrounds and such.
I love that. And I also love the fact that you're taking that data, not just using it in admissions, but to actually set the whole class up for success, and richer conversations throughout their time in medical school. Because we do know, and we've heard so many times, that diversity, not again sociodemographic just only, but diversity of perspective and life experiences really enriches folks. And I love that you've been able to actually use the admissions data to sort of propel them into that success in school as well. Mm-hmm. What do you think are some of the most notable shifts in the admissions landscape that have made programs increasingly take a holistic approach, or be more open to taking a holistic approach to really select their applicants going forward? I mean, it's more common in some programs to have this legacy of holistic admissions, but I think increasingly more and more programs are becoming open to it.
More and more people really see the benefits of having diverse experiences and viewpoints in medical school. And the more people that get on admissions committees that have had those experiences, the more people are willing to push for them and say, look, we really need to, it really counts, the background that people are coming from, it really counts, it's really important. And I think, a lot of that is just time and people's individual experiences. I think there's also research data that has come out. It's very well documented, for example, that patients fare better when they have physicians that they feel understand their background. They are more satisfied with their care. They're more likely to actually get the tests and treatments that they need. And it's very hard to dispute that data. So I think, we have both evidence, like the stuff I was just talking about, and then we also have anecdote. I mean, so now people in admissions committees, on our admissions committee, for example, are generally teachers in our curriculum. And I can share an anecdote from this year that happened a couple of months ago. And I was teaching a doctoring session, and we were doing a case discussion of a young person with fatigue that turned out to be a case of depression. And we had this conversation in which we were talking about depression, we were talking about accommodations. We got into a little bit off topic of the conversation. But one of the students said, excuse me, I mean absolutely no disrespect, but I attended high school in a different country. And in the country where I'm from, we were woken up every day at 4:45 a.m. And then they came around again at 5 a.m. And if we were not out of bed and dressed, then we were woken up with a flogger. And I don't understand how we could possibly say it's okay for people to just not participate in something because they're not feeling well. And again, this was all about depression. And then another person in the group said, yeah, I'm in my country, we don't have depression. And we just had this very interesting conversation. And I kind of said, well, so having taken care of patients from your country, my sense is people probably do have depression, but it looks different. They don't come in saying I am depressed. They come in saying I'm tired, I have headaches, I have back pain, I have, and then we kind of, so the point is that we had this incredible discussion, and what was magnificent about it is that these students were learning from each other in a totally organic way. It was not somebody saying, well, this group of people sometimes presents like this, and in this group of people, or remember in this culture, it looks like this. It wasn't that. It was students who were, they all felt like they were very similar to each other because there they all were in medical school, but they're sharing these vastly different perspectives. So that is the sort of experience that admissions committee members have. And then they think, we have to keep doing it. We have so important to make sure we have people with all different perspectives, and that, I mean, I can think of any issue in medicine where, again, it's not, I mean, in this case, it happened to be nationality, and people were talking about the culture of the countries that they came from, that was different. But it could be anything. It could be religious viewpoints. It could be simply experiences within the healthcare system, Um, and I think that's so important. So I think that's why people are starting to be more willing to consider it's data, and it's then these experiences that people have it's anecdote also that convince people that it's so important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think both of those are true. It's the compelling stories too that we remember and we hold on to. And then it's supported by so much data and evidence as well. Now, there are some programs, in and out of medicine who are really just getting started on this journey of making their admissions process more holistic. Mm-hmm. What would you suggest to someone who wants to know the best place to start? Because moving to a holistic process can feel a little bit overwhelming. If you're used to maybe a more streamlined or simplistic process, are there tactics or even mindsets that you would sort of say are the great starting point for them?
From my perspective, I think it really is a shift in mindset, because what I think about holistic missions is that there are not a lot of shortcuts. And I think it's a deeply human process. And because you're really like using humans to understand, like, who are these people in front of me? And so it really is a shift in thinking, okay, I have to fill this many seats and I've got this many applicants. So they're looking at numbers and percentages, with thinking about each individual person that you're looking at and trying to figure out, okay, I need to make a good decision for this person. And then again, find a class that's aligned with the institutional mission. So I think that's the big shift. And I guess I wish that I had something easy, like an easy little trick that people could do. But I actually think the fact of the matter is, I think this takes a fair amount of time and effort. And I think it's very hard to make shortcuts. I mean, I'm extremely proud of our admissions process. And also it takes a lot of person hours to do.
Absolutely. And to me, it's, one of the other things I've reflected on is that it's not ever, I don't feel like done, in the sense that you're always iterating or you're always looking, as the world around you is changing, or as your curriculum might change, or other things, you're trying to make sure that you're evolving it a little bit in baby steps. That sort of reflective nature, I guess you would take on it.
Yep, it's absolutely true. And there are big shifts that happen, like when COVID happened, and then there are big shifts that happen, like when we change our curriculum, and now we're trying to make sure we have a kind of learner that's going to like our curriculum, and then there are small shifts, which are just the sort of year over year, okay, this was smooth, this was rocky, this didn't go as well as we'd hoped, what can we change? So there is a continual evolution.
So in your career, have there been barriers you've come across to doing everything that you want to do in holistic admissions? Or have you ever talked to colleagues who have experienced barriers when they've tried to, expand or evolve their process? Some examples maybe of resource limitations that others might be able to anticipate. Do you have any ideas of how they can overcome some of these things?
So, I mean, a huge resource is money. This work that we do, as I said, is pretty labor intensive. And I think it is easier to get people to do it if you can compensate them. So that's one piece of it. But I actually think that might be a smaller piece of it than people think. So I absolutely 100% feel that people should be compensated for their effort. That's why we pay our admissions committee members. That being said, I actually really think that admissions is a sort of labor of love, if you will. Um, People who are on the admissions committee usually really like it. When they stop doing it, it's almost always because they get another job that is going to take up more of their time and they think, oh, I really like this. I don't want to drop it, but I just don't have that number of hours every week to give to it anymore. So when you're trying to get people to do it, if you don't have buckets of money to throw at them, or maybe even if you do, I actually think it's really effective to invite people to participate so they can see what it is to be on the admissions committee. And then people decide, oh, this is actually really great. I kind of like it. So, and maybe maybe I actually would like to do it. Maybe I can find room for it. So it's just important for people to understand, you know, you're really important. What we're having you do is read this whole application, this person's whole life story, and then spend an hour talking to them, and then write it up, you know, after that briefly. Um, I think that when people do it, they actually find that they enjoy it. So, having people do it, even if they can just do it for a year or whatever, is really important. Um, that's kind of a way that I would go about it.
Do you see that, having folks, you talked about some of the folks on your admissions committees, they actually teach within the curriculum. Um, do you find that that gives you buy-in later on for folks being like, how do you see that connection between the having them involved in admissions and then being perhaps somebody whose role is actually later on in the curriculum?
Yeah, so I think that people are really thinking about the learners that they're going to teach later on. I think it helps the admissions committee emphasize kind of intellectual curiosity and people who are passionate about the field, regardless of whether they're passionate about research or social justice or whatever the things are, because that's who you want to teach. You want to teach people who are interested and invested to be there. You're not really all that interested in teaching somebody who is just sort of so about it, or who's kind of doing it because their parents think it's a good idea. That person may have amazing academic metrics, be perfectly capable of doing it, but if they don't want to do it, then they're not going to be as fun to teach. So I think having people invested, um, it makes people focus probably more on the intellectual curiosity and passion for medicine part of it. The other thing is that I think it helps people understand, if you know what the curriculum is like, you have probably a better feel for what people will be able to manage, what will be hard for them, what will be. And so it's not so much like, oh, just certain grades and certain courses that you're looking at. It's more, I don't know, you might look at other experiences um, to convince yourself. One very specific example is, so we have a master's in medical science program that's it's a post-baccalaureate pre-med program. It prepares people for medical school. Our program is one that's really designed for people who took their requirements already, but maybe didn't have the performance they wanted in undergrad. And so they do our program, they take high level science courses, and then, a big percentage of that group goes to medical school, either at our school or someplace else. We have found that with this program, the students that we take from that program do incredibly well in medical school. They're extremely well prepared. They're leaders in the school. They're great school citizens. They like being here. They kind of know the place. So that's why they get to kind of be leaders, because they've been here for a little bit. But also, these are students who by definition have lower undergraduate GPAs, right? These are students who have maybe a 3.1 GPA. Might be somebody that ordinarily an admissions committee would look at and say, are you kidding me? No, that's too low. Except that with just 1 year of additional coursework, they are incredibly well prepared. And this is, again, one where we have both anecdotes, because we know these folks, and also loads of data that shows we've been doing this for decades. And if people do well in the master's program, they do well in medical school. So that's like just an example of how, having experience teaching, this committee is very able to be like, oh, we don't even need to worry about that undergraduate performance. That's not who they are now. They were somebody else back then.
So that's actually really, really powerful, because I think not only is it sort of that identification of, GPA is one data point, but how do we actually use other data points that we have to really get that picture right of who that person is and what their potential is for the future. Curious as well, just as a side note, One of the things that I know you really focus on is the mission of the school.
Mhm.
And you focus on that obviously very clearly at admissions. But I wonder, sometimes we've heard from folks that there could be a bit of a disconnect between what you do in admissions and sort of the way the rest of the school might enact mission or things like that. Do you find that there's continuity or more continuity, in terms of that alignment to mission with sort of that connection across that sometimes silos that can exist between admissions and in program?
I actually find that there's a great deal of continuity. And, we are looking for people that are really invested in our mission. And, this has been sort of an interesting evolution for me, actually. So when I came here to BU, my first objective was to make us stand out. And I thought, there were all these amazing things about this medical school that I didn't know until I started working here. And I didn't know them despite the fact that I've been practicing medicine in the city of Boston for 2 decades. And I was like heavily involved in like primary care innovation. And yet there were all these incredible innovative things that we were doing here. And I had no idea they were happening. So a big part of my thinking when I got here was I need to make sure everybody understands these amazing things about this medical school. Like we really need to talk about this. It's standout. It's phenomenal. It's like it's exciting. It's like it sounds cool. Even if social justice is not your top priority, it still sounds really good, right? So I really actually approached it first from this is so special about this school. We've got to make sure everybody knows. I wanted everybody to know, oh, I'm applying to Boston University School of Medicine because it's a social justice medical school because they do these amazing things. And then all of that talking kind of developed. And I was fortunate because at the same time as I started, shortly after I did, we also got a new Associate Dean of Medical Education. And she looked at the same things and said, yeah, we have to really be explicit about this in the curriculum. So those things kind of happened together. Shortly on the heels of that, the admissions committee started focusing more on what people are bringing to the table and wanting to make sure that the candidates that we choose are kind of in line with that. So I would say, now one of the things I tell people is, look, we're a social justice medical school. We probably care a little bit more than your average school about what it is you did to demonstrate that you want to help people. In medicine, everybody needs to want to help people. If that's not one of your main drivers, you probably should find a different job.
Right.
But, you know, but I would say there are so many different ways to help people. And at our school, when we're looking at people's activities, for example, we're not just totaling up hours and saying, oh, look, that's a lot of volunteer hours. But for example, somebody who has spent a lot of time, at the foot care clinic in a, outreach program for homeless people experiencing homelessness, or people that have spent a lot of time, they did tutoring, but they did it for, middle school students in an underserved school. Those are examples of activities that we look at and say, that person looks a lot like us and what we do, and they are probably going to like it here and feel comfortable here, as opposed to lots of other excellent ways to do service. I volunteered for the Red Cross. I did the Relay for Life. I organized my school's like big giant service day. I think those things are wonderful and amazing. But like when we're choosing between people, we're looking a little bit more specifically at things, at the specific activities where you're really working with underserved groups in a direct and consistent way, because that's what we do. So that, I think, is an example of how our admissions processes have evolved a little bit, because I think it's just a little bit more specific than it used to be. We want students that we can help them meet their goals, and at the same time, they're going to help us further our goals too.
I love that. That's the layer or the intersection, I should say, between your mission and your holistic approach. It's how you can really, each school could personalize their holistic approach. It's going to look different for every school, and it should, because it has to focus on your mission. I think that's such a great story. Now I'll give you a little bit of forecasting opportunity. It's sort of a crystal ball question, because we are going to release this episode in early 2024. And so people will be trying to think about what's coming this year. What do you think the future holds for holistic admissions? What do you think we're going to see next in terms of the way folks are talking about it or approaching it?
I think that we are going to see increased incorporation of large language learning models that will be used to help identify candidates that are likely to be successful in different school programs. it's not at the point yet where I can say, oh, just use AI. That's a good shortcut and you can do holistic admissions, blah, blah, blah. But I actually think that that technology does offer schools the opportunity to like be more specific about the things that they care about without needing to spend so many hours reading applications. So in our system, I have said this, a human reads every single application. That's really true. We really do. Also, the team of reviewers spends an enormous number of hours reading all those applications. And even I, who am deeply committed to this process and do not want to be replaced by a computer program of any kind, think, okay, it would be helpful though if I could do some sorting, and that I would be okay with that. So I that's actually, and I'm not going to say this is going to happen in 2024, but when I look at the future, I think we're probably going to incorporate that technology in an increasing way as time goes on.
Absolutely. And I think it's going to become really interesting for people to create their sort of ethical frameworks around that use. We actually just released ours at Acuity. I'll send you a copy of that after this. We can link it in the show notes below too. But I think that's sort of going to become a big thing for schools to consider is, how do we do that in an ethical manner?
Yep.
As you say, not getting rid of the humans, not touching it, but how to create efficiencies.
Right.
I love that. So what are your maybe 3 big takeaways that you could give folks sort of about holistic admissions that you'd want them to consider, or based on what we've chatted about today?
So I think the first thing is really what I started off with, which is that the objective really should be to look at each candidate as a whole person and figure out, again, who they are and what are the things that they bring to the table. I really do believe that's the best way to make a decision. And then once you've got each candidate sort of sorted out and a little bit of an idea of, okay, who this person is and what they bring to the table, then when you're doing your selections, you can put all those people together to come up with a balanced class, so that you don't have a whole class full of all people who look the same, but you've got a class with people that have certain things in common, but then different balanced attributes. So I really think that looking at the candidate again as the whole person and trying to figure out what they bring is good. And then you can decide what your institutional mission is. I think that's thing number 1 and 2. And another takeaway, I guess the other thing that I would say, looking at the future is, everybody always says they're in a period of rapid change, but really, I think we're in a period of rapid change. We've had a couple of very big changes kind of hit us in the last year. And I'm not even including COVID, because like COVID happened and we went virtual and okay, that's done now. But I think the Supreme Court's decision about race and admission, and I think the kind of landing of AI into sort of popular awareness and everybody's talking about how to include it now, those things I see as major changes in the world of medical school admissions that are forthcoming. So I really think that right now, and probably for the next 3 to 5 years, we are going to see some big changes and reshuffling. And then I think it'll probably settle down after that. And incidentally, we haven't talked about it, but I actually think that situational judgment tests like Casper are, that's also part of that. I tell everybody this when they are worrying about those tests and what to do and how to handle them. One of my pieces of advice is, I know that it feels really scary and kind of uncertain right now because this is a new tool. But just please know, all of us know that these tools are pretty new. And yes, we are doing the research and we're trying to figure out how best to incorporate them in our processes. And pretty soon we will have figured it out. Again, I usually say, like, look, give us 3 to 5 years and we'll have really good data that tells us this is exactly how we're using those. And then they won't feel so scary or confusing anymore because it's just like, no, this is just part of what we do. Just like taking a big giant academic test that covers all of your prerequisites.
I love that. Thank you so much, Kristen. Not just for sharing your insights, but the stories with us today, because I think not only does it help folks actually understand this at a deeper level, but it helps them think about what they want to do at their own institution, how to implement processes, how to think it through. So thank you so much to all of you for watching and listening. Thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you in the next episode. If you enjoyed this episode of our show, please be sure to check out the other episodes. And don't forget to subscribe. We have a new episode releasing every week.